Okay. Welcome back to the podcast. It has been only about a week or so.
Well, about a week.
Um, this podcast, I have very little planned because I know you have a lot of stuff that you want to discuss or things that you want to talk about. So I'm going to let you steer this ship and I will sort of paddle along. So what was one of the first things that you said you wanted to talk about?
Well, I honestly feel that politicians are taking America into the crapper.
Okay.
I I think that politicians are legalized criminals. I think that we're paying them and they're not doing a job for the people. They're just doing the job for the party. And I'm very upset that we've lost the process of liberty and justice for all in one country under God. What do you think about that?
Uh, I think most people my age will agree with everything except the last part, which is that we've lost the whole liberty for justice. So a lot of people my age who pay attention to this stuff probably would say we've never had it. So we've never
That
had
could,
liberty and justice for all. So, but that whole first part, yes, 100%. They like most of them. I wouldn't say all of them because I think there are some good ones out there
yeah,
fighting the good fight, but I think they're continuously drowned out by the excessive bad ones because the bad ones make the most noise. Like everything else, the ones that we don't like are the ones that are doing the wrong always tend to be the most loud or the most aggressive or the most noticeable. So, yeah, 100% agree. Um,
yeah,
sidebar, sidebar.
yeah.
Um, not a fan of liberty and justice for all under God because church and state should be separate. But that's a separate conversation for a separate time.
Okay, I agree. I agree. Maybe I misspoke on that,
No, no,
but
it's not a misspoke. That's what you've been taught, and that's what we've all been taught. I'm simply adding that, like, I'm not a
okay.
fan that we're told, under God, indivisible with liberty and justice for all. Meanwhile, we've been taught for decades that church and state need to be separate. Anyways,
Right, right.
anyway.
I see so much polarization going on. Um, I remember that during World War II, prior to World War II, the people in Germany, there was a lot of starvation going on, lack of jobs, and they had a painter who wasn't a very good painter called Adolf Hitler, who motivated the people by picking on Jewish people, and he said they were taking away the jobs. He said he believed that he had to polarize and create enemies to uprise the people. And before you knew it, it was like a rash. Uh, Germany was spreading war throughout Europe. And to modernize it, bin Laden once made a remark, and I'm not quoting him, but it was kind of like America has a great army. You can't beat them militarily, but you can destroy their economic system and you could get them to fight amongst themselves. And that's what I see could be happening. And I think the fighting amongst ourselves began uh, in the last presidency more so than ever before. And we now have an ex president who, for the first time, 3 years before the next election, is starting to campaign a bit for the presidency. And that doesn't usually take place till 18 months before the next election. It's already 3 years. He's really premature, starting problems. And to top it off, the problems that are occurring are we're divided between red and blue states, much like the North and the South were during the Civil War.
Okay. So, couple things. Do you see the comparison that you made with Hitler and bin Laden to the attack the inside of the base, let them fight amongst themselves concept rather than trying to defeat them with your own army? Do you think that's outside doing? Like, do you think that someone outside of the US is causing this, or do you think that this is just poor politicians and people within our own system who are just crappy?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's starting to become a lot of politicians that are crappy. For example, like I said, we have the red
Mitch
and blue.
McConnell.
We have we have multiple parties, which is fine, but you know we have too many slick things going on, gerrymandering. We have politicians passing laws where restriction of voting or creating voting situations where it's difficult for minorities to vote.
Or better yet, not even better yet, because they're all problems. But even further than that, with Texas and the whole abortion thing, with the $10,000 bounty for anyone who relinquishes the name to the doctor or the person or the driver or anyone who helps the person get an abortion in Texas. And I believe I read an article this morning that said Texas is looking towards putting a death penalty towards people who get an abortion. Excuse me. And something I saw a clip of it. I think it was on Fox News channel, not their website. They're now no longer calling them women. They're calling them host bodies.
Oh, wow, I didn't see that.
They are dehumanizing women by calling them host bodies. And I saw the clip of a guy, for some reason, I don't know if he's trying to get the word normalized, but he said the word host bodies like 5 times within 2 sentences. It was an unnecessary amount of times he said it, as if he was specifically either told to keep saying this to normalize it and get it talking, or he himself is uncomfortable with it and it's awkwardly coming out. But yeah, he was talking about women in reference to abortions, but was talking about host bodies, which is awful, absolutely mind-bogglingly awful.
Yeah, it's terrible.
But yeah, so I'm just adding to what you were saying in terms of politicians absolutely just having no connection. And something as well that I would add is a lot of politicians that we have right now who claim to be for the people, by the people, and are arguably supposed to have their sort of ear to the ground and paying attention to the people around them, all seem to be 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Some of these politicians were living in the 50s. Like, they were full-grown adults in the 50s. And you're telling me that the people, some of them are white, some of them are straight white men who probably had some really problematic times in the 50s, are making our laws.
Yeah, we should have, we're a society that doesn't like age restrictions. There was a lot of fighting going on mandatory retirements at one time, but I really agree with you. I think that I would rather have a restriction on term policies in the judicial system, term policies on for politicians, and age restrictions also.
I think especially when it comes to politicians, we should have an age restriction, because at a certain point, you've lived such a life that arguably you won't want to change with society. Society is an ever-changing animal, whether it's ours, England's, your wherever, China's, whoever's. It's an ever-changing thing. Even if it's minor or if it's macro, micro, whatever. If you're in your 70s and you were alive or you were um an adult, let's say in the late 60s, you were born, let's say 49, and you are now 20 years old and it's 69. You For you to be in 2021 making laws for the people who you most likely have no idea who they are and you probably don't talk to most of them, that's absurd, absolutely ridiculous. um and personally, I would rather have a younger person willing to push for something new and make a mistake than have what we have now, which is these elderly politicians who are sort of looking out for their own skin and setting themselves up or their families or their friends up for further success rather than the success of the general public.
Yeah, they're absolutely might have the general public in mind, but too many of them, not all of them, are controlled by lobbies, and they're doing what the lobbies are telling them to do. Um,
But that's
and
because of their age, though. You don't like, arguably, you wouldn't see as much lobbying. This is a guess. I don't have factual evidence behind this, but
but
I'm arguing that younger people wouldn't be as affected by the lobbying because they don't have a lot in stake. When you're 70 years old and you have a 50-year empire of a company or a family lineage or whatever behind you that's been funded by these lobbies, sure, yeah, of course you got a lot riding on it. But if you've got, you're a 20 or 30 something year old and you've got the fire of AOC in you, and you're, not necessarily saying you're AOC, but you've got that sort of personality where you're going after it. You're not just sort of playing it the common way.
see, that's where I don't agree with you. I think that uh, the older people have made their connections with lobbies and maybe set in their ways and have great affiliations with lobbies. But I think younger people who are entering politics and have to win elections and have to stay in office to get through, the years and fight against the older politicians need the money that the lobbies will provide them. So they're susceptible, you
See, but
know.
that's the thing though. They don't need the money. The system that has been built around it has set it up that the lobbyists are needed. Because I can create an environment where the things are needed, and that way I can create a full circuit. It's not needed. It is significantly easier and it will greatly benefit their chances. But realistically, if we want to see a positive change, we need to have people find their way up without them.
Okay, so
Realistically,
what would yeah, so
is
well,
it going to be easy? Is it going to be doable? Is it going to be something we're going to see in the next 2 years? No, it's something that's going to happen slowly or
okay,
drastically, depending on if something major happens in the country. If something massive happens in the country and there's a major shift, that's different. But realistically, it's going to happen slowly because someone else needs to carve the new path. And, you know,
okay, we'll see.
do I know that path? Hell no. Otherwise, I'd be doing it.
Yeah, yeah, but here it goes back to what I opened up with, uh, where there's polarization going on. We got age polarization. We got red states, blue states polarization. We got race polarization. We got uh, freedom of rights polarization, for the LBGT. We got so many different types of polarization where people take a stand and the stand is inflexible. And you cannot have a country that's inflexible. Uh, and that is a very, very big problem. Like here in Florida, we have the biggest fight right now, and I'm sure in other parts of the country too, but in Florida, where our governor is fighting against the federal government of the use of masks and funding. And this is not just becoming a once in a while occurrence. It's occurring all over the country, and it's polarization that has occurred in the last 2 years. I just want to make a point, and then I'll get off my bandwagon. I have a best friend. We've been friends for 65 years, and he is an avid Republican. I am not. I am not someone who believes in Republican or Democrat, although I've never changed my initial registration. What I am, I vote through my heart and what I see. He's a Republican, do or die. Two guys I play golf with are Republican, do or die, and that's their selection, and they're inflexible. And that is what polarization in our country is causing the biggest problem. And we're getting so many problems, and we have like you had mentioned, we have a very old president. We got rid of the lunatic president for the time being. Now we have a very old president who I knew was going to be left with a lot of problems. And now there's even more problems. And the polarization that's occurring in our country on different topics, I agree, I disagree. I agree, I disagree, is not trying to be stabilized by politicians. They're feeding this polarization, and they're creating problems. And that's why I say they're nothing more than criminals. And you could see anything going on, from people taking sides on should police be funded or not funded, should statues be taken down or not be taken down, should masks be worn or not be worn, should you get COVID shots or not get COVID shots. And I can reel off another 10 different, topics.
Right.
And that's what bin Laden and Hitler did. Hitler more so because he marched through Europe and created World War II. And that's why I say America is headed towards the crapper, because we're like a snowball. It's just happening. The snowball's getting bigger and bigger.
Well, so all right, there's a few things to unpack with that. First, I will say yes, I agree with you. We are snowballing downwards. To what the bottom of this mountain is, I don't know. To what that result will be, no concept. In terms of the polarization and that whole topic, couple things. One, I don't think the issue with the polarization is that people are hell-bent on their opinion, are being stuck on it, because I think there's plenty of arguments that people need to be stuck on, that people need to say, no, I'm not willing to give for this because this is right. Rights for LGBTQ people, rights for Black people, rights for women in Texas. There's no budging on that. Women deserve the right to choose what they do with their body. People should have the choice and the agency over their own body. That's something that I agree. March it. Let's ignore everyone who opposes it, because that is fundamentally the answer. There is no other answer.
No, I agree with you.
So, but hold on. But so that's where and it's a spectrum, of course. There's sides that are people are hell-bent on, and you're more like, but that's I understand where you're coming from, but I think there's a better choice.
It's not up for discussion.
There are some arguments that truly, in my opinion, are not up for discussion, i.e. women's rights, or anyone's rights for that matter, in terms of women's rights to their body, LGBTQ rights, Black people's rights, everything, all different types of human rights. By all means, no discussion. Everyone should have equal rights. And I say equal with gentle care, because equality and equity are a very important discussion to have, because equality can become very unequal depending on the category of people you're talking about. So I'm very cautious with how I say that. But at the same time, there are plenty of conversations that people are trying to have that they're saying, no, this is a non-discussed. We're not having this conversation. Meanwhile, it needs to be discussed. There needs to be some leeway.
Right.
You know, for whichever ones you want to talk about, there's a spectrum to it all. My opinion with the polarization is it's less about how stuck people are and more about people's compassion for each other and common sense and compassion and patience in terms of listening, being able to listen to someone that even though you completely disagree with, you're still willing to listen to and say, I understand your point, here's mine, with full respect and full compassion for that person and their opinions. Even if you believe they're wrong, they believe they're right. And you need to figure out, as a person who's having that conversation, are they genuinely wrong? Because, for example, excuse me, someone in Texas who says $10,000 bounties for abortions, they are fundamentally wrong. There is no way in hell that that is a right answer in any shape or form. I don't care if it's your religion. I don't care if it's the laws in the town. None of that is right. I do not care. I will not listen to anyone who ever says anything otherwise. Women get to choose what they do with their bodies. Absurd, absolutely absurd argument. But if you're telling me, we need more educational spending, we need to allocate more money towards education, I agree. I 100% agree. But where are we taking the money from? Because if the money's now going to come out of some other form that's going to screw up our society, then we need to have another discussion. Because if our money, let's say the like, I'm all for taking, let's say, money from the army or from the war spending section. Let's take some of that and put in education. But if we're going to take some money from whatever it is, Social Security, or from funding towards other aspects, whatever it is, homeless people or properties or carers, anything that has to do with caring for humans. If we're taking money from that to put towards education, we're trading one bad for another. So that's a conversation that you can have. So I think, in my opinion, the conversation needs to be less about why people are so stuck, and it needs to change to, why aren't we compassionate enough? Why aren't we educated enough to have the common sense that says women need to have the right to do what they want?
Why won't people listen and discuss, like you had said, rather than just say, no, this is what I believe and I'm not changing? And that's the way the problem exists, the polarization. That's what I'm saying.
Well, but I understand the polarization, and I'm simply saying, in my opinion, the way out of the polarization is to teach people compassion and teach people patience and empathy towards one another, and recognizing that though you may have this very odd or problematic opinion, you are still a human and you still deserve the right to be heard and loved by someone, maybe not me, but someone. And therefore you have the right to say what you want to say, but you may not be right. And that's the issue. And I think everyone feels that they are entitled to be right. And that's partially in part by social media and the fact that I can go on Facebook, make a Facebook group that says pro Texas abortion law. And anyone who is, even if you're not from Texas, if you're some schmuck off from Arizona who agrees with it, can join the Facebook group, and we can all pretend to be, we can all women hate and say, yeah, abortion is $10,000 bounties. I can't wait to get my money. And no one can say otherwise. No one's going to step in. Mark Zuckerberg's not going to come in and say, hey, that's 2000% wrong. I have to close this group. Sorry. No one's going to do a damn thing. And it perpetuates an emotion that not only cultivates people, but it makes them think that they're right. Because they say, well, I know I'm right. I've got 1,500 guys who agree with me.
Especially when the sound bites are being thrown out there and
Right.
people listen to the sound bites. But, you know, it's good what you say about, you know, people trying to be heartfelt on, you know, situations and, uh, you know, be emotional and try
But
to.
it's a difficult balance because, like I said, there's a spectrum to it all. There's times where arguably, fundamentally, there needs to be a no, you are wrong. This is the right decision, and we need to fight for this decision. You know, the problem is sometimes that topic, i.e., Black Lives Matter movement, gets so broad that it then becomes up for discussion about, well, what about this part? Well, what about this part? At its core, at its absolute core, it was about rights towards Black people that they are do not have at its core. That's why it was arguably started. As it expanded and got bigger and it broadened, and there were subcategories who claimed that this and that, yeah, there's of course there's going to be discussion, but at its core, the people who really tried for it was for the rights, human rights.
I
That's
think the
that's a non-discussion. That is factual. We need to get that. That needs to be a
I
thing because we
I
see.
think I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think some of the well-caring politicians uh, try to do something about it, and I think a lot. No, wait, let me finish. Yeah, I didn't finish my saying. The majority jumped on the bandwagon for notoriety if they felt it would benefit them. But remember, we've always been a country like this. This is what always amazed me. I remember in 19 when I graduated college. No, I didn't graduate yet. I took a break and I drove down south and I was watching, you know, civil liberties, the marching and all that stuff. I didn't take part in it, to be honest, but um, I remember uh, beautiful Baptist churches singing and praying, and they would be black and white, you know, in Baptists, and praise the Lord, and then white men would go out and hang a black man. He could be in the same church, you know, and
Right.
that to me is a dichotomy of what things should be like in our country, and that's was one issue that we've always been trying to correct. But now, what I'm saying, and without repeating myself, we have so many issues where there are two sides of the coin, and there has to be uh, a way where politicians aren't the ones that decide what is right and what is wrong. And
Well, and that's why we have what we have now is this dichotomy, is because we do not have a right and wrong right now because no one's there to tell us that there is a right and wrong. We used to be able to trust news. We used to be able to trust politicians. We used to be able to trust our teachers. We cannot trust anyone but ourselves on a regular basis as of right now because it has been consistently shown news outlets, no matter how prolific or how good they are screwing up and lying and hiding the truth. Politicians are outwardly lying and outwardly lining their pockets because they want to save their family and not everyone else. And
look what happened. Look what happened to 1,700 priests this week.
what happened?
I think they got They might be getting indicted.
Oh, wonderful. So,
You know.
but wonderful sarcasm. Uh, but so okay, furthering my point, priests that we used to believe were holy people who, and obviously this is not all priests and not all politicians and not all teachers, but we as a society are learning about this. I have never experienced, and I don't think I have in my life experienced a priest that was that problematic, but I can read about it and I can understand that that's in my country. That's my state next door. That's my state. That's the middle of my country, my nation. That's part of where I'm being raised. And that's happening. That's important. That's important for me to know because it's what, like, it's important for me to know that something's going on in Texas. It's important for me to know what's happening in Florida. You know, so like, but because of that, because of the our world has expanded exponentially. You know, when it was in the 60s for you, you didn't have a clue what was going on in California unless you had a friend there who went, yeah, I was just there and this is what was happening, right?
No, because there was a governor, uh, Jerry Brown, who was very vocal.
So, but what I'm saying is you had to hear from someone by word
Right,
of mouth.
right.
They
Word of
had to
mouth.
have gone over there, or you had
Right.
to have been getting a newspaper, or you had to get a letter that took days or weeks. I can now, right now, before you take a sip of water, I can go on an app and find 5 articles that are major things that are going on in California right now. So,
Right.
for that reason, we are able to recognize how problematic our entire nation is. And that's with the entire world, let alone
Mm-hmm.
the information that's going on with the other world. But a good example of why, to bring it back to the dichotomy of what you were saying, um, part of the reason why we have such a dichotomy is because we things that we've been raised to trust are being proven to be not trustable. What the hell's the word? Trustworthy. God. Um, they're proving themselves to be untrustworthy. A good example is I saw again recently, the um, uh, Afghanistan with all the problems that people are trying to. It's Afghanistan, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's trying to leave.
Right.
So the shot where everyone's running through the airport, and then we get the shot of them running on the tarmac with the plane. Apparently, there's a shot where everyone's bursting through the doors at the airport. That was from 2019 at a baseball game or football game. That was a stadium, a sports stadium in America. And it was used on multiple news stations in news articles and on live television to say, look, these are the people trying to escape. That was a 2-year-old video of people in a stadium. Why? Because these news companies are so hell-bent on being first and not being right, and caused excessive panic. That though this is a serious topic and though these people who are trying to escape are in need, we are literally getting fed false information.
Mm-hmm.
Why then would I trust this company, this news outlet, to give me anything when
Why
in
would you
a
trust?
time of crisis such as this, they're feeding me incorrect information?
Yeah, it's the same thing. Why would you trust the president, any president at the highest office in our country who lies, and people listen to it and it becomes a soundbite and they follow him? I mean,
Well,
Drew,
and just like you were saying before with the soundbite culture, yeah. I mean, people will take a clip, a 5-second clip, and record and repeat that recording and use it as a mantra. And just like Hitler argued, the way to get people to follow is you keep it short and simple, and you just keep repeating it, and eventually they will keep going, and they'll follow it
Yeah,
because
and
they'll
you pick on a group so that the people who are having problems have an outlet outlet for their frustration,
yes.
and and that's what our country does.
Well, and it's because it sells. And
Yeah,
that's the core of American culture, in my opinion, is profit. It
yeah.
sells.
Well, it could
Because
be.
what there is nothing else that drives profit more than conflict. Kardashians built a whole empire off of it. All they did was get into conflict or be of conflict to society. And they are all of them are billionaires. All of them. Or close to billionaires. Um, Politicians, Trump, you know, everything that's news outlets, every single news outlet dramatizes their stories or only tells you the bad stuff. When was the last time you heard something good on a news channel? When? I, for the life of you, for the life
I
of me, I
remember.
cannot tell you. I can't even tell
Yeah,
you when the last time I read a good article unless I looked up happy news articles
yeah. I
because it
try.
doesn't sell. People
Yeah,
don't want to be happy. They want to justify their anger. They want to justify their things. Obviously, people want to be happy. What I'm saying is people want to justify, like you said, they want
yeah.
to have it on TV.
Polarization.
They want to have it on
Polarization.
a what?
That's where the polarization falls
Right,
in.
right, right. And that's why I was saying before, to counteract it is compassion, empathy, respect, understanding, patience, things like that would go a long way.
Yeah,
And common sense.
yeah. You can't solve a problem if you have two different opinions by arguing, unless you could sit down and discuss it. And you may walk away with the same viewpoints, but you have to be able to discuss it.
Yeah.
And that's where we're having major, major problems. Yesterday, on a lighter note, my air conditioner broke.
Oh no.
And no, no, it's, I have to have cold because of the medication I'm on. And they sent two guys to fix it. And I said to one guy, put on a mask. And he has a dirty T-shirt on. He says, why? I says, because you're entering my house and you got to put on a mask. I don't want to put on a mask. So I spent 10 minutes with him. He kept putting on the mask, taking it off. Finally, he was going like this with his shirt.
Yeah.
And at the end of the time, I didn't think they fixed the air conditioners, but they did, and I was incorrect. But at the end, I walked out to get the bill, and I was still wearing my mask. He says, "You should read up on this." He goes, "You should be better informed about why you shouldn't don't have to wear masks."
Oh god.
And uh, and I said to myself, uh, "Should I talk to somebody who's going to make it one person short of an intelligent conversation?" And that's what we have in our country. The line is drawn on the ground, and from the smallest thing to the largest thing. And politicians, in my view, are throwing logs on the fire to get reelected. And
Right. They are.
yeah, I,
They are.
I, and we're headed for the crapper. Yeah,
I
I mean,
look. I am in agreement. I agree with you. I think a lot of people my age are agreeing with you because that's why a lot of us are emotionally distressed, because we are aware of the climate, not just actual climate, but like the climate of our society, because we because we're aware of it, we're so distressed. We're like, we can't buy a house. Most of our jobs are not paying us enough to own even an apartment, let alone healthcare or anything else, livable wages. The food that's good for us is too expensive to live off of. Everything costs money. Cars are too expensive. uh, there's like hell I'm going to have kids because I can't even afford to live on my own. I'm going to get a dog. I'm going to live till whenever, and I'm going to die till whenever. And none of us can even focus on things that we should be focusing on, like setting ourselves up for retirement. We don't even think we're going to retire because my generation, first of all, Social Security is going to run out in like five years at best. So there is no retirement for us, um, unless we become financially literate. Which again, why was I taught 17 forms of math that I'm never going to use, but I was not taught how to do a Roth IRA, a 401k, how to invest in stocks, how to balance a checkbook, how to deposit a goddamn check. But instead, I was taught rhombuses and how to multiply and use theorems for geometry. Obviously, some of it's important. I get it. I'm not saying all math is crap, but like,
Well,
I didn't need to learn about the Byzantine Empire 6 times from middle school to high school. But you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
So
That's why uh, certain honest politicians will say, instead of spending money, go to college, go to a trade school. And if you learn it, not you, I'm
yeah,
just saying, people should go to a trade school because the plumber is going to come out and maybe make more than the doctor. So, and not have to pay all those college expenses and such. So,
well, and I think, and that's, I mean, we can have that kind of conversation another time because
yeah,
trade
yeah,
school versus college versus no college, I, you know, I have a lot to say about that, and I think that we could have a very good
yeah,
conversation
we can.
for another time, um,
Hmm.
because I'm not necessarily in agreement with any of them solely. I have goods and bads about all of it. So by all means, yeah. I understand why politicians would say that though, because
Okay.
you know something like a plumber is very much needed. Very
Yeah,
much need
you
plumbers.
know,
You
a,
like we're always gonna need plumbers.
yeah,
Unless
we have electricians, things like
unless our
that.
toilets wirelessly take our crap to the oceans or wherever they take them,
That's right.
we need
We have
plumbers.
a lot of lawyers, not enough doctors though. Not underpaid teachers. Uh,
Well, that's a
and
that's
that,
a separate conversation too, is
yeah,
why, some of the most important people in our society are our teachers. They used to be respected in in, shall we say, Greco-Roman, ancient Greco-Roman history, respected beyond belief. Teachers were some of the best people. Now they get paid as bad as McDonald's workers.
yeah, and I can't understand that because teachers have such a big, strong lobby. So I don't know. But anyway, moving on. Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
What do you think of a one-party system?
What do you mean by that?
Where when we don't have Republicans, Democrats, Independents, we just select, oh, I don't know, 10 candidates, and I'm just throwing out a number. And from these candidates, from the different portions of the United States, uh,
So
hopefully,
rather
no,
rather than rather than um, sort of brand them as a left and right, a red and blue. It's just you're the person who represents my town or my state. Go fight for me.
yeah, and
Less
they may,
than less than the idea of red or blue, and more so just you're fighting for my state. I vote you because you're the right person. So more like a parliament, or are you talking more like a ancient like Greek Roman democracy where they're all in a freaking thing and they're talking and deliberating until they get what they need? Which one?
I don't know.
Are you saying something along those lines where it's more so? Um,
I'm just saying you have a ballot, you vote for the candidates, they select the winner. Now, that could be a whole bunch of crap also because the person, the people who get elected one person could have views that would be considered for the red states. Another person could have views for the blue states, but you have one party, and you probably would get a mix of different viewpoints in the electorate. So
I would say to change the lingo from one party to no party, because having the conversation of a one party state sort of brings us into a topic of almost not totalitarianism, but a almost big brother concept that like we're all one, like you're with us or against us type thing, versus having a no party concept. And arguably they're the same thing. I'm simply saying lingo wise, um, using the term no party seems a little more usable because by having no party and no affiliation, you're voting for the person and not because, and I presume what you're trying to get at is the concept of what you're getting at is voting for someone because of what they actually believe in, not because they're red and blue.
right, but then
That's, yeah.
then once they get elected, they could go red or blue. It's just
Well, but that's the thing though.
yeah.
You asked me, what do I think of it? I think having a no party thing is great. I think because what it does is it forces people to learn about said person and
Mhm,
see whether they actually agree with what their beliefs are.
mhm.
It forces every single person who's voting to actually learn, because if you put this, and I'm convinced this is why we have it, the red and blue and the green party and the socialist party and what all these different things are simply just to make it easier for our non-educated little pea minds like mine, because
No,
like
you're not a P1.
I'm
You're not a
just saying,
P1.
I'm just
I
saying,
mean,
I compared to a lot of my friends who are poli-sci majors, I know dick.
you know,
So like, but my point though is like people like me or people who are, because arguably next time I have to vote, I'm going to educate myself further. But plenty of people I know are just like blue, blue, red, blue. I know blue tends to align mostly with what I want, so blue. Like, it's
what are they going to do when they can't mail their votes in?
that's going to be a separate issue. That's going to be something
Yeah,
that
well,
we
that's
got
what
to
I'm saying.
see when
That's
that
why
happens.
it's
Uh,
happening. It's going to happen, and that's why I'm saying these politicians are nothing but legalized criminals. They're passing laws, and it's getting by uh, their populace, and
well, they're also, but part of the reason they're getting by, and this was something that I remember learning about in class, is because we have such a weak local power with our states and our governors and everything. When these laws are being put up, we as the public can attend a lot of these meetings and reject them and tell them no, this is why. And it would also show, if we went regularly or we were there and present, it would also educate our public or local audience to help them recognize this guy's not good. We don't want him in office. Let's not put him back in office. Let's vote for the young kid. Even though that young kid may not know a lot, this guy just tried to siphon money from teachers because he wants to put it towards drilling. That's going to help uh, the whatever, some major company. That's an awful thing. So let's not put him in office. The problem is none of us have time for it. None of us are interested in it. It's too complicated. It's too covered up with so many layers of things. No one feels like they can ever just get into it. And I know this based off of friends, family, and whoever. Politics in general is seen as messy and seen as something that is too complicated to get into. You had to have gotten into it earlier. And if you want to get into it now, it's a ton of work. Um, and for those reasons and more, people don't want to participate and or can't because they're working paycheck to paycheck, hour to hour, and they can't afford to take time off to go to a freaking meeting at town hall about where their money's being allocated to. So, but like it sucks because those are the important things, and that's at its core because it's a ladder. If we
Mhm.
if we put better people in our town halls, we can then work towards putting better people in our states, and then our state governors, and then so on and so forth. And we can work
Well,
our way upwards because if we have good people down here and we keep working our way up, we can work towards good people up there. But if we don't even have
if
good people at the bottom, how the hell are we even going to get people out at top?
yeah, yeah, if, but unfortunately, it's a big
Well,
if.
yeah, if is always the topic of at hand.
Yeah, and we also have uh, a group of younger politicians out. My governor in Florida is one who I may not agree with what he does, but he is bright. People can call him an idiot. People can say whatever they want to say. I don't agree with what he does. I would say 75% of the time, but he's a Harvard and Columbia graduate. I mean, he's very well spoken. Uh,
Yeah, but
he,
that
he,
depends
he,
on what your definition of smart means because I can be textbook smart and I can list off facts for the next hour because I make TikTok videos where I run fun facts and that can make me look smart. But when it
but
comes
can you?
time to be street smart or be actually smart and apply that information and recognize whatever rules or laws that are fundamentally right, but because I'm not and I'd rather make laws that benefit my people or my 1% of friends, that's not smart at all.
Yeah, well, I know you got to have a balance. I mean,
You
I
know what I
say to
mean? So my
myself,
point though is just because he went to Harvard, it doesn't mean he's smart. And just because he
hey,
speaks well doesn't mean he's smart. He may
yeah,
be
I,
smart by the standards of a school system, but he
yeah,
may
I
not
get,
be
I get your
practically
point.
smart.
I get your point, but he's smart on all bases. I mean,
Okay.
my opinion, like I said, everybody has different opinions, um, but I don't agree with him. I didn't. I won't vote for
I don't
him.
know enough about him to
Yeah,
arguably say. I'm simply stating that there's just a massive difference between based off of what I've heard that Florida's been doing. Uh, it doesn't seem like he's as smart as Harvard may have taught him.
yeah. Well,
But
possibly, but you don't get to be a lawyer. You don't have the
exact right.
balance.
I'm
And all
also
that stuff.
sitting
Yeah,
here being 23 years old, and he went to Harvard, and he's a lawyer, and he's also a state governor. So, by
you're right.
all means, my
Yeah,
word has
yeah.
carries no weight or water to this topic.
That is correct.
It's simply an
That
opinion.
is okay. And I don't want to get into this discussion because this could be 4 podcasts. But you and uh, I believe in women's rights. I believe in gay rights. I believe in Black Lives Matter, and I believe in the police in our country. However, we have different derivations on certain breakdowns of these rights, uh, as well as rights of the average individual. Then again, if you threw me into Texas or Arkansas or Mississippi uh, or South Carolina, I'd probably get shot within a year. So I am very sensitive to all people's rights. I mean, because I'd open my mouth and I'd be the one that would be hung. So I don't want to denigrate those people. There are a lot of good people in those states, but I just don't,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So
Well, and it's scary. That
yeah,
it's genuinely scary to
yeah,
see how far our nation as a whole can span in terms of opinions and thoughts and how acceptable it is to have those thoughts and opinions not only be present in people's minds, but be broadcasted. We said this just, I don't know if I said this on the podcast before, but I said this just before where we were talking about the Texas abortion laws.
Right.
I saw a video of a guy, I believe it was on Fox News, talk about women. And instead of using the word women, he called them host bodies. He dehumanized women.
Yeah.
And called them host bodies for whatever reason.
Ratings. He wants controversy.
No, it's not even ratings. It's what it is. And this is a common thing that people do. They're separating. He believes in this anti-abortion law, and therefore he feels something. He feels empathy. He feels bad. He feels some sort of emotional reaction to the fact that he's saying women don't deserve the right to pick. And so because he feels bad, but because he also still believes in this, he's separating himself he's separating the word from his dialogue. So he's calling women host bodies. That way, in his mind, he can justify saying they don't deserve rights. They don't deserve as many rights as we do.
Okay. So where
awful, absolutely crazy, awful concept that there are people in our country who have that thought, and it's not only acceptable and followed by people, but it's broadcasted on live television.
Yeah, and that's where politicians either should deny something that was said like that instead of feeding off of it.
Yeah.
And feeding to the crowds.
The problem is, I believe the politicians agree with it, for some of them at least, and they're promoting it.
Yeah, I mean, we like I had said before. Usually, after an election, you leave the new president to try to establish his own goals, make his own mistakes, correct some of the things that he feels the previous president did that he doesn't agree with. And then by his second term, midway to his second term, you really start criticizing. And then you have candidates campaigning for, the next president's election. But again, you got the man who eats fried chicken and wears red hats. He's now
toilet paper and paper towels at people like he was shooting Kobe.
Yeah. And last night
made fun of disabled people and lied and was racist and
did the commentary on a fight. Fights. So we have people who go, "Wow, that's my guy. That's my guy." Oh, good. That's their guy. He's not my guy. But I predict that if a person like him, doesn't have to be him, but a person who's been riding on his coattails, possibly like my governor or a few other people in Texas or whatever, they decide to take the reins and run and they win, I think we have a problem because right away, when our president and vice president was elected, they keyed in on him being too old and her being black. I do think he's too old, and I think her being black has nothing to do with any issue. So, right away, people started to talk about Afghanistan and his presidency is a failure. Do I agree what he did in Afghanistan? Again, is he taking us into the crapper? Yeah, because I think he should have pulled out the people before he pulled out the soldiers. But again, you got to remember that our former president, President Trump, he said we'll be out by May 21st. So he established a deadline.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people who are trapped should have known there's going to be a pullout, should have gotten their behinds out of Afghanistan in advance. So now it's falling on old man Biden. Okay.
Yeah.
And again, I cannot be a Democrat or a Republican when mistakes are made. And again, my statement was we're headed for the crapper. And I feel so sorry for your generation.
Thank you so much. Your generation is the one that caused it.
I do. I do. I feel
You guys are. You guys took everything. No, it's fine.
no.
Uh,
We
we'll
disagree
start.
on a lot.
It's
We
gonna
disagree
blow
on a
up.
lot.
It's gonna blow up. We'll nuke ourselves, and we'll just start over. It's fine. Um, with that, we will close out. Before we do, I want to wish you happy Grandparents' Day. September 12th is National Grandparents' Day. So,
Oh, thank you very, very much. I
welcome.
appreciate that. I appreciate that.
So,
And
all right.
I appreciate that we're able to talk about things that we may not agree upon. And that's what I wish our country would do.
I know. Well, that's the purpose of this part of the purpose of this podcast is to be able to have these talks and disagree. So,
Yes. Okay. I love you. Peace
all right.
out.
Well, peace out.
Okay.